poetry workshop. Oh, already botched that. I actually have a little script that I'm referring to, which is probably why I got that slightly wrong. So if you see me looking down at something, I'm just looking at a script so that I don't go off-piste like I just did. I am so excited to deliver this Poems for Remembrance workshop for you in partnership with two charities, the National Literacy Trust and the Royal British Legion. The Royal British Legion sell red puppies to help raise money for the armed forces, veterans and their families, and to remember what they do for us. You have probably seen red puppies in November, but did you know that we can remember the people who help us at any time of the year? That's why we are coming together today to create our own remembrance poetry. When we write about the people who keep us safe, like the armed forces, we are remembering them and saying thank you. So, I'll put this little script down because I don't need it to say the next bit, which is, my name is Nikita Gill. I am a playwright, illustrator, and just a general writer, but most importantly, because I love this part of my job, I am a poet. I started writing poetry when I was 6 years old. I didn't know I was writing poetry until my grandmother basically told me that I was writing poetry, because you see, I was a bit of a naughty kid. And what I was doing was that all of my textbooks, you have textbooks in school as well, I was writing poetry on the sides of all of my textbooks. You should have seen my history textbook. It was just covered in rhymes, and very silly rhymes, and some quite rude ones as well. So my grandmother, who is the loveliest woman in the entire planet, decided that instead of telling me off for that, she was going to get me my very own poetry notebook. Now, I hope you have a poetry notebook in front of you just now, because that is exactly the thing my grandmother gave me. And my teachers were delighted because I stopped writing quite rude things and rhymes in my textbooks. So, first question, I've been rambling on for a bit. Does everyone know what poetry is? Does anyone know what poetry is? Teachers, if you could put the answers into the text box that you've got going on over there, I would love to hear some answers from you. What is poetry? There are no wrong answers because poetry is art, and in art we don't have any wrong answers. We have answers coming in. A short story. I love that. Someone's gone off kilter, and I absolutely love that. The more off kilter you go with your answers, the better they are. A form of writing that flows. Yes, we like that. We love a bit of flow in poetry. Poets are all about flow. It's great. Even when we're not about flow, we're about flow. Okay. And, okay, as we're waiting for those answers to come in, we have, you can tell your feelings as a poem. Lots of mentions of rhyme. Yes, a lot of people like rhyme in poetry, but I've got to tell you, you don't have to rhyme to be able to see that what you are writing is a poem. Maybe you're not very good at rhyme. I'll tell you a secret, I'm not the best at rhyme. I'm not, but I'm still a poet, and I've been doing that for so many years that I can't even tell you because it would reveal my age, right? So, amazing, amazing answers. Short lines of rhyming words, any topics, expressive ways of telling a story in the form of a song. There's so many different types of poetry. Fantastic. I love that we came to that because that is exactly where I'm going to go next. Why is poetry important? What is it about poets that is supposed to be, why is poetry even a job? Right? Why is it? So the job of a poet is to retell history with emotions in it. I often say, and this is a bit like of a funny line, but poets are the emotional historians of humankind. So what does that mean? While history talks about what happened, a poet examines how people feel when the thing is happening, what changed inside those people's hearts, and how that change then changed the world, because we can do that. We can change the world with words, and we can change the world with poems. A poet's job is to change people's minds and hearts make them take action in times of sadness, bring them hope in times of adversity. Poems can take so many forms. Some of you may like rap music, some of you may like rhymes. Well, it seems like lots of you like rhymes because that's come up a few times already. Poetry takes so many forms, right? Maybe some of you like making up silly rhyming songs about your brother or your sister or your cat like I do. I have so many rhyming songs about my cats. I think they're quite upset with me at this point. So this leads me to the next question. Can you think of when or where you saw your last poem and how it felt? Teachers, if you could maybe put some answers in the text box for me about the last time you guys heard a poem and how it made you feel. You're also allowed to say that you didn't like it, by the way. There are no wrong answers, remember, in art. So if you didn't like it, then you didn't like it. It's fine. Flanders Field. Oh, that's a difficult poem. Someone come up with something happy, please. Quick, let's get out of here by Michael Rosen. It made me feel happy from Ted. Thank you. That is a beautiful poem, and Michael Rosen is definitely one of my favorite poets as well because he is very funny and he makes me feel very happy. So we made a poem in English in year 5 based on Benjamin Zephaniah's The British. He's a great poet as well. He was a very great poet, Benjamin Zephaniah. Amazing. So you made up your own poem, year 5. That's incredible. Right. So we have a few answers there, right? And again, really good answers. So 2 years ago, because I'm a poet and my job is to move people, I was asked to write a poem about remembrance, which is a very special time when we remember the stories of the people who came before us during the First and Second World Wars. Right? So 2 of my great-grandfathers fought in the First World War, and my grandfathers have very big memories of the Second World War, and they've told me lots of stories about it. So I was very happy to sit and write this remembrance poem because I had a lot to say about it. So I have a really strange way of how I write poems. I know that, like, maybe you've written a story before, you've written a poem before, right? And you start at the beginning, and then you have a middle, and then you have an end. And you start in this form where you start, and then you've got middle, then an end, right? I start my poems at the end. I find something that I really have a lot to say about and think a lot about. And then I start the poem on the last 2 lines, and then I work my way backwards, which is a bit of a twisty-tailed around way of doing things. But again, in art, there's no wrong or right way to approach things. So how would you write a poem? From the back to the front, maybe from sideways, maybe just random words you like? A few answers there from the students would be amazing, teachers, if you could put them in the text box. Wow. So we've had so many responses come in that the text box has basically exploded. This is where the text box is supposed to be, and it's exploded. So we're just going to come back to that in a minute. Top to bottom, upside down. Upside down poems are my favorite. Please send upside down poems in. That would be amazing. Create a bank of rhyming words. I love it. Everyone is coming up with such amazing answers. Fantastic. We will come back to this because I am going to actually I'm going to make you write a poem today. Don't tell anyone. Shh. Okay, so coming into this, when I was writing Who You Are, I was asked to go back into history and pick certain people that I thought were very courageous. For me, this wasn't just the soldiers who fought for us. I was amazed to learn in my research that there were so many people, the friends and family of those who served in the armed forces in the First and Second World War, who were so courageous, right? I found so much cool stuff. Like there was a whole medal that was dedicated to people, regular people, just like you and me, who were really courageous and stood up for us. Can you think of the last time you heard of someone do something very courageous? Was it maybe you standing up for yourself? And if it was you standing up for yourself, catch that feeling and hold it really close, because we are going to use it in a bit. So, why is it important to remember people in the armed forces? And how can we use stories to remember them? Teachers, if you could explode the text box again with some answers, that would be incredible. So, why is it important to remember people in the armed forces? And why can stories help us remember? Again, no wrong answers. Everything is the right answer. They gave us freedom. Yes, probably the most important thing. They gave us freedom so we can have these chats now. You imagine a world without art and poetry, because without those people, that's what we would be living in. So they protected us, they fought for us to remember our history, made sacrifices for us, risked their lives. Oof, yeah, amazing, amazing answers. My great-granddad fought in the war just like my great-granddad did. See, we've got something in common. Even though we're sitting so far away from each other and there's a screen between us, we've got so much in common, right? Okay. So, the most powerful thing in the world is a story. The stories that we tell each other may seem so small, like when you went to the shops and met a nice dog in a yellow raincoat and it wagged its tail at you. But what is important about that story is how it made you feel, right? Most of us feel very happy meeting a happy dog in a raincoat. The way a story makes you feel and the person who hears that story feels is why we tell stories. So can you think of your favorite story? What is your favorite fictional story? A story from a movie, a book, a TV show, maybe a story from real life? This is my last question, and then after that, we're going to go into our activity. Percy Jackson! We all love Percy Jackson. Uncle Rick did a really good job writing that. Wonky Donkey! Do you know, my niece loves that. She's 5 and she had a really, really good time when I used to do the jumping with the Wonky Donkey story. The Hobbit. Oh, we love The Hobbit. A little bit Tolkien. Tom Gates, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Fantastic. So you already have these amazing stories that are very, very important to you. So the reason why it is important to remember the stories of real people as much as fictional people is because it is very important to keep those stories alive, right? So for instance, in a story where a little boy or a little girl escapes a forest, the only way we know how to escape the forest is because the little boy or the little girl showed us how to do it, right? That is what the stories of real life people do. They show us that big, big things can be done. For instance, we learn that we can defeat dragons because someone in a story told us they can be defeated. That is so cool. So for me, Remembrance is a time to remember my great-grandfathers, both my grandfathers, and the amazing stories that they told me about the days that they were young, right? So can you think of a story that the oldest person that you've ever met in your life has ever told you? Can you think of that story, right? And if not, you can maybe ask them a story about when they were your age. Now think about the stories you've heard in the first session about those that served in the armed forces. Then write about what they told you and what you remember from that first session. This is a very good way of understanding why it's important to remember these stories, and to put these stories in a poem is very easy. So we are going to go into that now. I'm going to read out this poem that I wrote, which is all about all of this that we've just looked at, right? One day when someone will ask you who you are, one day someone will ask you who you are. But before you grasp for the legacy you always reach for, let me show you a different story. A story in which there are sirens and debris and two of the most devastating wars the world has ever seen. But even through this, the tales that endure are of courage and standing strong for your community. You see, the stories that I hold dearest come from my grandfathers who served in the Indian Army. They always told me that courage looked like the legendary Khudadat Khan, first Indian recipient of the Victoria Cross, and they instilled in me the knowledge that even through tragedy come great moments that live for eternity, like a father tenderly accepting his late son's medals in his memory, showing us the sacred bond that we call family. And maybe just like the stories my grandfathers gave to me, your lineage holds truths for you too. Perhaps you had someone like Dorothy who joined the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, being only 15 years old, because she believed that a better world is possible and is worth fighting for. The truth is, the exact measure of a person is who they are in times of turmoil. In times when they need to be the best of all of humanity, like a 21-year-old barmaid recommended for a Civil Defense Gallantry Award for saving a man's life. And even in moments of immense pain, from great courage came great art, like soldiers writing poems from trenches. And during the Second World War, despite the Nazis trying to ban it, people danced the Lambeth Walk, showing us that heroism can take 1,000 different colorful forms. So when they ask you who you are, tell them you are the result of kindness and rebellion. You come from poems written in trenches and dances that led revolutions, and from soldiers showing compassion to those they are meant to call enemies on Christmas Day. Right? We're going to stop there because I would like you to have time to do this activity. Now I want you to look at this poem before you. It is the poem I just performed. I would like you to find words that you really, really like, highlight the words, and then get rid of the rest with a black marker. I'm going to do this activity with you so you can see what I mean, right? It's going to be very simple. You can just find maybe a little stanza and just remove any words that you don't like and just keep the ones that you do. Let me see this over here, right? This is third, fourth stanza. I don't know which one this is. And we're going to go with, the truth is who they are in times of all humanity. Why not, right? Get rid of all of this, all of this, all of this. You see, the truth is they are in times of all humanity. Could be a poem, could be the start of something, could be rubbish, but that's fine because there are no wrong answers in art, right? So even in moments from great courage, I quite like that. From great courage came great art. So you can get rid of all of this, all of this, all of this, showing us, get rid of all of this, 1,000 different colorful forms. That could be a whole new poem. There we go. So this activity, you can show the results if you feel like it, but I think we're going to go on to the next one because I want to get you to do loads of writing, because writing's fun, and also you get to do loads of things when you write, right? So I'm going to get you to do some free writing for me for just a couple of minutes, right? About 5 minutes of free writing. So there are many different kinds of poetry, and for me, the easiest way to write poetry is through a style called free verse, because I'm not a rhyming poet. So I do free verse, which doesn't rhyme, right? Now, free verse means you don't have to listen to any kind of poetic structure that came before. You can make up your own kind of structure to the poems. So if you notice in the poem Who You Are, which we just did a blackout activity on, and we just changed around the poem completely, I haven't followed any kind of traditional structure. Instead, the stanzas just do what they like. So your brain just does what it likes as well, right? This is because the way I write first starts with free writing. Free writing means I just start writing. I don't tell myself that this is right or this is wrong, that this is going well. I don't worry about spellings. I don't worry about grammar. Big secret, I am a terrible speller. Just really bad speller. But I've learned not to pay attention to that because I've got an editor who does that for me, right? So if I give you 3 minutes on the clock, can you do some free writing for me? So think about everything that you've learned about the armed forces in the first session for inspiration. Just write down anything inside your head when it comes to these 2 prompts. I'm going to give you these 2 prompts. If you don't go with the prompts, that is also okay, because again, no wrong answers in art, right? So here are your 2 prompts. Let me show you a different story, a story in which there are. And the second prompt is, when they ask you who you are, tell them you are the result of. I'm going to write them here so that you can see them very clearly, right? So prompt 1. Let me show you. Oh my God, my writing is terrible. A different story. Right, I'm going to leave that prompt at that because I think that's much better, and then you can just write what you want, right? And then the second prompt is, when they ask you who you are, tell them you are the result of. So, 3 minutes, don't think too hard about it, just write. Use what you learned at the first session about the armed forces for inspiration. Come up with your own ideas. No wrong answers, just do what you want. I will be right back. exploded again, which makes me so happy, which means all of you are really inspired. And I've got a few that I can talk about to you that people have written in. So when they ask you who you are, tell them you are the result of courage in the darkness, forgiveness and bravery, the reason we have the symbol of the puppy. I love that. When they ask you who you are, tell them you are the result of compassion and courage. Let me show you a different story about the people who did a lot and the people who haven't forgotten about them. That's beautiful. All of you are poets, every single one of you. And you could all write your own remembrance poems, and you could rewrite them, and you could write 20,000 of them, I think, because there's so many amazing answers coming in. And there's another one that's just come in. When they ask you who you are, tell them you are the result of something legendary, special, and inspiring. So this is by a pupil at Godolphin Junior Academy. That's a poet right there. All of you are poets, and I absolutely love this. So there is a reason why I've made you do this activity, because now we're going to go into writing an actual poem, right? So does anyone know what a haiku is? So a haiku is an old Japanese form of poetry that is only 3 lines, but sticks to a certain amount of words per line. So for years, I've taught haikus in schools. And one of my favorite things about doing a haiku is that we usually look at pets. So a lot of people have pets or animals at home. And what we end up writing is a dog coo or a cat coo. Someone once wrote me a goldfish coo. Someone who lived on a farm wrote me a lamb coo, which was quite cool. And then someone didn't have any pets at home. So one of my most favorite things that I've ever received from a student is a little brother coo, because they did have a little brother at home. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to work with a method and a type of poetry that's very similar to a haiku, but it's much easier. So it's called a column-loon. Now that might sound like a mouthful, but it's actually very simple. So it was invented by a guy called Jack Column, and he basically came up with it, and then he did that thing where he named it after himself and thought, uh-oh, people might think that I'm being a bit arrogant, so I'll just put loon at the end. So that'll make it sound less arrogant. So it's called a column-loon because of a guy called Jack Column, basically. So column-loon goes like this. It's 3 words, 5 words, and 3 words. That's it. It's very simple. It doesn't have to rhyme at all, as long as the structure is 3 words for the first line, 5 words for the second line, and then 3 words for the last line. Now, take a look at what you wrote in your free writing exercise, right? And when I gave you those 2 prompts, now take a sentence or maybe 2 from inside your own writing and turn it into a column-loon. I'm going to do this with you, right? I'm going to use that poem that I read out to you to be able to do this. So don't break the structure of 3 words, 5 words, and 3 words. Instead, just adapt your own writing to fitting into the structure of the column-loon. Is that cool? Can we all do that? Looking into your free writing, pick a sentence or 2 and turn it into a column-loon. It's that simple. We're going to do this for I'd say about 5 minutes. Let's do it. So, let's go with someone will ask. 3 words. Okay, so we go before you grasp for that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Poets are not good at math, just so you know. Legacy. Oh, legacy. Before you grasp for legacy. Someone will ask before you grasp for legacy. Tell a story. tell a story. So that is what a column-loon looks like. It doesn't have to make a lot of sense. Haikus don't tend to make a lot of sense, but we can make it make sense late. What we're doing is a first draft. Let me see if I can erase this. Put another column-loon up there. There we go. Okay, so if I say stories we hold. Ooh. If I fall over, it'll be very funny for you, but I think they'll get upset at me. Tales that endure. Stories we hold. Tales that endure. Times test. Tales that endure times. Stories we hold. Tales that endure times test. About standing strong. So that's another column-loon. Again, don't worry if they don't make a whole lot of sense yet, because all we're doing is making first drafts. Oh, amazing. We've got some wonderful column-loons coming in from the schools. We've got A Different Story, A Soldier, Proud and Strong, Time to Remember. So there's from year 5 at Dubai Height, Who You Are, Standing Strong for Your Community, Courage Through Tragedy. Got a bit of a rhyme going on over there. Amazing. So, fields of poppies swaying in the light breeze while soldiers rest, by Zainab at the Godolphin Junior Academy. Oh, Godolphin Junior Academy, you are just amazing because you have so many poets there. All of you are poets. I'm really, really enjoying this. We have about 2 minutes to go for this activity, and then after that, so I'm going to read out, I think there's another one coming through. Our text box really has exploded today. We love it. Someone will ask why I hold a red poppy for the sacrifices. From Lola at year 6, Budbrook. That's beautiful. I love when people use the red poppy in their column-loons as well, because I think there's something very special about the red poppy. See, that's why I'm wearing one. I don't know if you could see that. That's why I'm wearing one. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your column-loons. It's been really, really wonderful to read them. And sadly, that was very quick because we've already run out of time. So I'm going to get my little script up because I have like some things which I need to read, right? So the first thing I'm just going to say very quickly without the script is what we've done today is done the first draft of a poem. Your own remembrance poem. Now this first draft does not have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to make a lot of sense. What I've written over here doesn't really make sense, but that's okay because what we've done is the seeds of a poem, and that's all a first draft needs to be. That is the hardest thing to do when you're writing poetry, is that first draft. So later on in session 3 with your teacher, you will have time to edit and add to it and make it make more sense, or using all of the things that you learned in the first session on how to make your own final version of a remembrance poem. So you can decorate it with drawings and doodles and even perform it on Remembrance Day as your very own act of remembrance. So teachers, we would absolutely love to read the poems that were created today. Could you please share the poems with us at the National Literacy Trust? So by taking part in this live session with me today, and when you write your own remembrance poems, you are remembering the people that have kept us safe and saying thank you. Remembrance is for everyone. It doesn't matter if you know someone in the armed forces or not. You can remember all the amazing people who kept us safe in the past and keep us safe today. So thank you so much for joining us today on this amazing workshop that we've had, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. And I hope that you keep writing poetry and realize that poetry is actually quite easy to write, and it's a lot of fun to do, and I really look forward to reading your poems. Thank you so much for joining me today. Do you have questions? Yeah. So we do have like a few questions which have come in today. If there's anyone, we've got like 5 minutes. So if anyone has any questions that they would like answered, any kind of burning question. So who's my favorite poet? It's really hard to choose, but someone mentioned Benjamin Zephaniah, and he is my favorite poet in the entire world. The other favorite poet that I have is Mary Oliver, because I love her work and it's very relatable. All she writes about is love and nature, and it's fantastic each time. How many poems have I written? I am old, so I have written thousands of poems. When you get as old as me, I expect you also to have written thousands of poems, probably even more than me. So do I remember my first poem? My first poem was by an amazing, amazing poet. The first poem I ever... Well, I think this question is, do you remember your first poem you ever read? And my first poem I ever read was by a great poet called Robert Frost. It's called Walking by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Maybe you can read that after this session. And it's a beautiful poem about memory and remembering and thinking about the future. And it ends with, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep, which has repetition in it. And I use that in a lot of my poems now, which is why it's one of my favorite poems in the world. It's the first poem I ever read. So thank you so much for joining me today. There are sadly no more questions, otherwise I'd just sit here chatting to you for hours. So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a wonderful workshop, and I really appreciate you spending time with me.